Thank you, Chris. Good evening. A couple of notes. On the 10th of October, President Obama spoke at the Human Rights Campaign 13th Annual Dinner. That's significant with our speaker this evening. And the second is that there's an interesting article that I read just this afternoon from the National Defense University titled "The Efficacy of Don't Ask, Don't Tell." Also ironic that we're having to speak here tonight to talk about that particular issue. So Steelcase is extremely proud to sponsor the Diversity Lecture Series. We're also very excited and happy that Mr. Alva will be with us tomorrow morning at Steelcase as we've invited our corporate community to hear him talk. And so we're looking forward to that at all levels of our organization. This is one thing that we're very proud of, that we have a partnership with the Grand Rapids Community College. Probably some of you might know that one of the key values of Steelcase is to treat people with dignity and respect. And we work very hard to promote environments that break down barriers among people by fostering understanding and respect. And this evening, on behalf of Steelcase, I have the real distinct honor to introduce you to Eric Alva. Eric served as Marine for 13 years. It appears that his enlistment may have been inevitable. His grandfather was a World War II veteran. His father is a Vietnam veteran. Their first names became Eric's middle name, Fidelis. The Marine Corps Latin motto, of course, is Semper Fidelis, or always faithful. Eric left the Corps with the rank of Staff Sergeant, having served in Japan, Somalia, and finally Iraq. As you know from the program this evening, Eric served with distinction and became the first American wounded in Iraq, receiving the war's first Purple Heart. Eric was born in San Antonio, Texas in December 1970, and upon graduation from high school in 1989, he attended the community college for 2 semesters, then decided to join the Marine Corps. After 13 years in military service, Eric went back to college to finish his degree. And while in school, he decided to be true to himself and help others, and came out as gay. On February the 28th, 2007, he joined Representative Martin Meehan, Democrat of Massachusetts, in introducing the Military Readiness Enactment Act. With this step, he openly admitted to the military and the world that he is a gay man and one who has served proudly and sacrificed for his country. Alva took a courageous step towards fighting the rights for all Americans, and in particular, for those who have served and are serving in the military, but who are unable to be true to themselves. His goal is to help achieve civil rights for all citizens of the United States. Eric is the national spokesperson for the Human Rights Campaign's fight to repeal the military discriminatory LGBT policy. Since coming out, he has been featured in Good Morning America, Anderson Cooper 360, Live with Paula Zahn, Newsweek, USA Today, and numerous other newspaper and radio stations across the country. The United States House of Representatives just this month passed a bill expanding the legal definition of a violent federal hate crime to include gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, and disability. Alva recently graduated with a master's degree in social work from Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio, where he lives with his partner Daryl and their 2 dogs, Champ and Bo. He hopes to pursue a career working with diverse groups and continuing the work towards social justice. As he said, "When I went to fight the war on terrorism, it was for the rights and freedoms of every single person in the United States. not just selected individuals. Please help me welcome Eric Alva.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you so much. I don't know if this is... Thank you, Brian, for that warm introduction. I was telling Chris earlier, Chris Arnold, I don't stand behind a podium because 9 out of 10 times they're usually taller than me or around the same height. So I'm only 5'1". As you heard Brian introduce me, it's been a sort of a road these last 6 years since the start of the Iraq War. But not only am I a son, an uncle, a brother, soon to be a father, I'm also, someone who's Hispanic. As we celebrate tomorrow's the end of Hispanic Heritage Month. I'm disabled, I'm a veteran, and I'm also gay. And so there was a lot of things that played into the part of how I got to where I am today. As you heard, being born in San Antonio, Texas in 1970, I have a twin sister and an older sister, and then of course, both my parents still living. I didn't do so well in community college after high school, and it was, the goal of my family or my parents that I would be the first one to go to college in the family. And most of all my friends were coming back that summer in 1989 and spring of 90, and they were coming home with their crisp uniforms and their high and tight haircuts, and the whole metamorphosis is what kind of caught my attention because I really wanted to be in the military, but I was following the wishes of my parents to go to college first. And eventually by the end of 1990, I did join the military because after 2 unsuccessful semesters in college with a bunch of C's, D's, and even F's, I knew that I needed a change. So eventually I went off to the Marine Corps, going to boot camp at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego, California. And at the same time, it was that I had gone off to boot camp, we were at the first Desert Storm Iraq War. And my mom was telling me and stressing, this is why I didn't want you to go into the military because, you may end up in war. And I said, no, we will never, have to go anywhere else again. Sure enough, as fast as you say something and then something happens, in 1992, my first real deployment came when I was sent to the country of Somalia for Operation Restore Hope. And most people can familiarize themselves with Somalia with Black Hawk Down, the movie Black Hawk Down. I lived in the stadium for a couple of months and then coming home and then eventually getting stationed, anywhere from Japan to California. And finally ending up in California after my last tour in Japan in 2001, where it was about the fall of 2002, where we had started to hear about October, like right about now, towards the holidays, where we had started to hear that we were possibly going to deploy to the Middle East for the possible assistance to the United Nations inspectors looking for weapons of mass destruction. Eventually the holidays came and gone, and in 2003, I was sent on an advance party with other service members from around the country that were already starting to prepare to get sent to the Middle East, and we left on January 15th and then arriving in Kuwait a day later. It was there we started to make camps, we started to build tents, we started to get vehicles off the ships, we started to get more weapons, we started to just get all kinds of tractors, trucks, trailers, binoculars, everything you could possibly think of that we were preparing when we were to go into Iraq. We stayed there for a couple of months, and it was until we finally got the word that the president had announced his 48-hour ultimatum to Saddam Hussein. And of course, us in the desert, we didn't have TV or anything like that, so we didn't see what was going on back here in the country. But it was on March 19th, which for us was March 20th because of the international time zone, is when we actually got the word that we were moving forward. So on the eve, before it got dark, we tore down tents. In fact, that whole day was just really, really busy and chaotic. Tearing down tents, loading up vehicles, and you can only carry so much in vehicles. There was a lot of gear we had to leave behind that the Kuwaitis were going to store for us or pack for us. And we actually started to head our vehicles, point them north towards Iraq, and we waited till it got dark, and so we headed towards the border. We didn't go across the border that first night, and the reason why is because, which most people will familiarize themselves with history, is because that's when we started the whole, and I'll share this with you, is that I remember that night, as it kind of, the weather was about like this, but a little colder, and it was cloudy and overcast. And I remember falling asleep when we finally got somewhere in the desert. And when we travel without using headlights on our Humvees because we didn't want the enemy to know we were coming. And so I eventually fell asleep in the passenger side of my Humvee, and I was woken up to the sound of these big thuds, and it was the bombing had started. And that's where the shock and awe had begun on Baghdad, where we could see literally like the illumination of the missiles going over. Of course, they were 1,000 feet above us, that lasted throughout the night. And eventually, I just became so immune to it as other people, and we fell asleep waiting to, of course, we still were on guard. But the next morning on March 21st is when the very first day that ground troops entered the country of Iraq. I was on a logistical convoy with 1st Marine Division, and our mission that morning was to secure the city of Basra. And we stopped outside the city before getting into it to regroup, and we had such a long convoy that it spanned it for about 26 miles. My vehicle, my Humvee, was probably about 4th or 3rd vehicle towards the end, 3rd or 4th. And so when I got into this area, which was a province called Al-Zubayr, outside of Basra, there was cars everywhere. Like, imagine like a beach somewhere, and there's just no parking lines or anything, and so all the vehicles were pretty much scattered abroad. I had told my driver to go park next to the contact vehicle, which is like our wrecker. It picks up vehicles when they break down. And I remember getting out of the vehicle because we had been traveling for a couple of hours, and I had gone to use the restroom. The second time I got back on the vehicle, and then getting off again was to retrieve some supplies from another vehicle. The third time I got off the vehicle, it was to eat my MRE, which is our meal ready to eat. Because that whole day before getting ready to travel, I had skipped lunch, I had missed dinner, and I had missed breakfast that morning. I was just too nervous because I was in charge of 11 junior Marines, and I had to make sure that and I was also the supply chief for a 1,200-man battalion. So I was responsible for a lot of gear for the unit as we went into Iraq. So I decided to eat my MRE, and I decided that I was going to warm it up because modern technology, we have these warmers, and 9 out of 10 times when it's warming up, we go and we do something else, or you're not just going to stare at the meal while it's warming up, because then it takes another couple of minutes for it to cool down. And I decided that I was going to go retrieve something from the side of my vehicle, my Humvee, and as I was putting my Gerber away, and 6.5 years later, I don't know what it was that I was ever going to get, and I sometimes still think about it to this day, because all it took was a couple of steps, and then that's when I had triggered the landmine. It had been there the whole time, I guess, and I just missed it the other couple of times I got off. And even people walking around, people had missed it, because I remember that there were a lot of people walking around that area. I remember, as the blast went off, and there was black smoke and sand falling and dirt falling, and I was awake. I was awake for the whole thing, probably going from here to the other side of the podium, or even near the podium, grabbing my right arm, and you could see the damage from my hand, because I have so much nerve damage that my left arm was broken, not realizing it, and the tip of my pointer finger was gone. And I have to share something with you, because as a disabled person, this little area of our fingers, like our everyday pinch. And I didn't know that until you have that saying, you don't know what you have till it's gone. But we use this like 1,000,000 times a day to put on our glasses, turn our cars on, put on our earrings, button our jeans, button our shirts, put on our ties. Everything we do is we do with our pinch, whether you're left or right-hand dominant. And I had to learn, of course, going through rehab to how to live again, because I am right-hand dominant. But during that injury, being awake, I remember just still screaming. And by this time, I saw someone take my 9mm pistol away. And I remember, people coming and running to help me, and my hearing was still deafened, but it was coming back. And by this time, we have chaplains that travel with us. So the chaplain was holding my head, and I was asking him, what's wrong with my legs? And he said, no, your legs are fine. I said, well, I can't feel my legs. And I was so coherent that I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm paralyzed. Why can't I move? I can't feel anything. And eventually, I was put on a vehicle, taken to a helicopter at a landing zone, and I was taken back to Kuwait, because we hadn't gone past Basra, so there were no hospitals in Iraq at the time. anyone who was getting injured in those first few hours, even first few days, was always having to go back to Kuwait. And I remember the helicopter ride, and I remember just thinking, like, why are we taking so long? Because I could see when they were cutting off my uniform, there was a lot of blood. There was a lot of blood. I didn't know what my injuries were, but I just knew that, like, there was so much blood that I thought, oh my goodness, I'm gonna die here. And when we got back to Kuwait, I was taken off the helicopter on a stretcher, taken into a makeshift hospital, a tent. And I remember just the anesthesia going on, and by this time I had so much morphine in me anyway. It was only hours later, which of course I've lost all track of time by then, that I woke up in this tent. And there was all these beds lined, uniformity, and I was the only one in there. And it was the first time I had to really assess what happened to me. My left leg was broken, my right arm was broken, and it was my right leg had been so damaged that when I looked down at the sheet from my bed, that the right leg was gone. The doctors had to amputate my leg above the knee. And all that morning, I had only been in Iraq for 3 hours. Giving me the dubious, I guess, distinction of being the first American injured in the Iraq War. From there, I went on to Germany, and if things couldn't get worse, my lungs collapsed in Germany, and it just got worse and worse. But then eventually, I was moved, when my wounds were finally sustained in Germany, I was transferred to the National Naval Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. And it was there that President Bush and the First Lady, Mrs. Bush, Laura Bush, came to visit me. Several politicians, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, Nancy Pelosi, she wasn't Speaker of the House at that time, other senators, congressmen, Arnold Schwarzenegger came to visit me, Michael Jordan, Baltimore Ravens. People often ask me, like, who was your favorite, visitor? Because I ended up on Oprah Winfrey, I was in People magazine, I was like all over the news, and people often ask me, who was your favorite visitor, Eric? And I was like, and actually it was Sheryl Crow. And everybody's looking at me like, I guess, and I was like, and then realizing later only a gay man would say that, so. But of course, I spent like about 6 months in the hospital, and of course, there's nothing more that could prepare you for such a tragedy, such a change of life, and then of course going to rehab for 9 weeks and waking up every morning, and of course taking medication, or just it's time for rehab for 8 to 12 in the morning, an hour for lunch, and then from 1 to 3 for 9 whole weeks, because I had to learn how to walk again, and I had to learn how to write again. I had to learn how to get back to that normal life of all my activities of daily living. I was given the opportunity to stay in the military, but I was told that I would never serve in an infantry again, or I would probably, have to just, do admin work, which I had already done. But I didn't want to see myself staying in the military, and I had decided to opt for the military retirement, which came in on 30 June of 2004, completing 13 years and a couple of months of active duty service in the United States Marine Corps. But it wasn't until a couple of years later, even after, where I started to notice things in the country. It was even in 2005 where my own state of Texas, where we overwhelmingly passed Proposition 2, amending the state constitution, banning same-sex marriage in the state. And I didn't think anything of it, of course, as a quiet, GOBT activist, I kind of just, of course I voted no against it, but it passed. And I started to wonder and ponder myself, thinking, as a person who has sacrificed for his country, I don't have the same liberties and freedoms as everyone else, and how ironic is that? But then I just pretty much put it away. Then in 2006, I started paying attention again to politics, and I started to just seeing the whole perspective of my life and getting, used to of who I was, and noticing that in 2006, 8 more states had state constitution amendments to banning same-sex marriage, and that was a year that I think Arizona was the only state at that time who defeated theirs, only to lose it last year in 2008. And then I finally decided that year in 2006, you know what? I'm going to contact the Human Rights Campaign and tell them who I am, and maybe I can do something. And if those of you who don't know what the Human Rights Campaign, most people will assimilate it with that little blue sticker on people's cars with the 2 yellow equal signs. It's the largest civil rights organization for the lesbian, bisexual, gay, and transgender community in the country, in the United States, with it probably about 800,000 plus members now. So I contacted them, and I told them that I wanted to help out. If you ever came to San Antonio, I could work at a Pride Festival, or I could just, if you need anything, let me know. And again, be careful what you ask for, because of course, they contacted me, and I traveled to Washington, D.C. in 2006 and said, we think, we would want you to help us if you're willing to, Eric. And of course, I made that decision when it was, as you heard Brian mention, on February 28th in 2007, when I traveled to Washington. And as I sat alongside Congressman Martin Meehan and other representatives like Congressman Christopher Shays at the time when they introduced the Military Readiness Enhancement Act. The Military Readiness Enhancement Act is a bill designed to repeal, which I call the discriminatory law / policy of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. To go into Don't Ask, Don't Tell, it is the only law that will be 16 years old next month in November. The only law that was signed into by Congress in 1993. And it's hard to believe, because when I tell this to people, and it was even hard for me to believe, because even I had served under it quietly, it's the only law in this country, in the United States of America, that literally forces people to go to work every day and lie about who they are. Because if you don't, you will be fired or even possibly imprisoned. That is the law of this country on how we treat people, still. And so I knew that when I went to Congress the first time, on February 28th of 2007, and I remember doing the interviews, and Jake Tapper, who is the senior White House correspondent on ABC, was the one who did the interview and broke the story. And I, most people had asked me after that interview, or with, not just with Jake Tapper, but at Congress, was why now, Eric? Why after, 4 years later, after 2003, have you decided to speak out? And I said, well, as a person with notoriety, the first American, regardless if I was the first American, or the 10th, or the 100th, or the 1000th, I knew I had a responsibility and obligation, like I had when I took the oath to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that when I went to war, and as a United States Marine, as a patriotic American, to defend the rights and freedoms and the liberties and the democracy of this country, what it's built on, that meant for every single individual. That does not mean like, okay, you, well, you have glasses, not you. You, okay, well, you're African American, not you. You, oh, you're gay, not you, definitely not you. Oh, you. It was for everybody, not the selected few. And on the basis of this country, that's what I believe, that's what that's for. That's why I had to speak out on of course, one of the last, especially the laws of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, that continues to oppress people in this country. Just to give you a little history on Don't Ask, Don't Tell, with it being 16 years old, most people always wonder, well, they're not going to ask, you don't tell. In reality, the Don't Ask, I came in before Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and the whole part of Don't Ask, Don't Tell is that when we applied for the military on our applications, we were asked about our sexual orientation. And in 1990, when I applied, I lied. I already knew, I suspected I was gay. I had an idea. And so when the law passed in 1993, all those documents or applications were changed. They don't exist anymore. New ones were created where now people, young men and women, or people who want to join the military, or even ROTC on college campuses, you are not asked about your sexual orientation. That's what the Don't Ask part. There is a stipulation, of course, once you finish your process, there's like a small paragraph from what I've heard from people, is that you have to literally sign that understand what the policy is, or the law is, that you can be in the military as a gay man or gay woman, you just can't tell anyone. So that's what the Don't Tell part was. Since Don't Ask, Don't Tell has been a law in almost 16 years, some of the repercussions of it is that we've lost over 13,500 men and women from the armed forces. Currently, today, according to the General Accounting Office, there's over 65,000 gay men and women in the military. But losing 13,500, some of those people were in valuable critical skill jobs, such as Arabic linguists, air traffic controllers. I'm privy to the fact that every job in the military, or any job in this country, is important. But to fire someone solely for the basis of their orientation is wrong. And when you do fire someone like that, someone who is an ROTC graduate, or someone who has gone to Arabic linguist school in Monterey, California, or fighter pilot school in Pensacola, or something, every time we fire an individual, It's cost us as taxpayers, as people, as citizens of this country. It's cost us between $200 million since 1993 to $2.1 billion to investigate, eliminate, and replace individuals just for being gay. And that's ludicrous. And you know, it's amazing because when we look at the fact that, you know, 23 of our 26 NATO countries allow gay men and women to serve in the military. One of our strongest allies, Great Britain, who I served along with inside, I remember, not just in Kuwait, but as we entered Iraq, we had British troops with us. You know, it's only the United States, Turkey, and Portugal that do not allow gay men and women to serve in the military. In 1993, the percentage of people who who said that they favored openly gay men and women to serve in the military at the time was about 34%. As of last year, July of 2008, by an ABC and Washington Post poll, that number is grown to 75% of the American population favor allowing gay men and women to serve in the military. And it's just not just about polls. It's a broader sense of why I had decided to come out. And I will share with you as an example, because even today, 1 in 4 troops from a Zogby international poll, 1 in 4 American troops coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan have stated that they have served alongside a gay member in the uniformed services. But it was last year where, as we move forward on working on legislation for Don't Ask, Don't Tell, that on July 24th of 2008, when I literally went back to Congress a second time, but this time it was for a congressional hearing on the House Armed Services side, Subcommittee of Military Personnel. And there was 3 people there who actually sat, of course, in favor of repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and you have to hear both sides. You have to hear both sides, and we had 2 proponents who wanted to keep Don't Ask, Don't Tell. One was a retired sergeant major, and one was a lady by the name of Elaine Donnelly. And as we all gave our testimonies, and it's on YouTube, we did this for 2.5 hours. And I remember at the table, it's like what you see on C-SPAN with the microphones and people testifying because you're being recorded. And we have these little lights that go green, yellow, and red that start to tell us when to start cutting off our remarks. And I had the unfortunate experience of sitting next to Ms. Donnelly, because when she was giving her testimony, and she was like pretty much assertive and aggressive with members of Congress on the House Armed Services Committee, telling them, if you get rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and I quote you, and you can see it on YouTube, she stated, she goes, you will have all new cases of AIDS in the military. That's what she said. She went further to tell members of Congress, which she was digging herself really deep, was to tell members of Congress that she said, not only will you have this happen, she goes, if you get rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, you will have men raping men and women raping women. And I knew as she kept going on and on, I knew as I sat there, I said, this is why I can't give up. This is why I'm still serving my country in a different capacity now and still following through on my oath and obligation to protect it for its individuals. We live in a country today of diverse individuals and what I call beautiful, unique individuals. We are not all going to agree. That is something that is obvious even when we watch the debates on healthcare. But there is a fact of the matter is that when I tell people is that it's about life. It's about people, regardless of who they are, regardless of what gender, what race, what ethnicity, what culture, what orientation, what physical, mental disability, what gender identity, what sexual orientation, it does not matter. Because in this country, nobody owns your happiness. Nobody owns your happiness, nobody owns your happiness, and nobody owns my happiness. I know, is not to sound so narcissistic as it sounds, that for the blood I shed in Iraq, it was for the liberties and the freedoms of every single individual in this country, even those who oppose me. It's hard to imagine that, you know, even in 2009, that we still deal with discrimination, you know, and the fact that, you know, most people, you know, say and argue that if you repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, then you're going to destroy the military. You're going to destroy the fact of the matter that, you know, and as Sergeant Major Jones stated during that hearing on July 24th, is that he goes, Madam Chairperson and other members of Congress, he was telling them, and it wasn't a big members of Congress, just certain individuals that sat on this committee, he told them, if you do this, you're going to destroy our military. You're going to have all young men and women resigning their commissions. You're going to have all these individuals resigning or not re-enlisting, they're gonna say, I can't work with those people. And I was sharing this with Chris earlier and everything when, as we had lunch today. And I was like, well, Sergeant Major keeps referring to gay people as those people. Well, you know what? For someone who says, well, I would retire too, or, these people are not going to re-enlist, good luck on winning the Powerball. Because if you leave the military, guess what you're going to work with? If you work at the Amway Grand Hotel, if you work for, Grand Rapids Community College, you work for Pepsi, you work for McDonald's, you work for Walgreens, you work for CVS, you work for anything and anywhere in this country, places are changing. The non-discrimination policies in the workplace are changing, that people will not be discriminated on the basis of everything, now to include sexual orientation and gender identity. If someone like Sergeant Major and anyone else who leaves the military because they say they can't work with those people, good luck on getting a job, because this country is changing for the better. It is our job as individuals, because most people always ask me, what can I do to help, Eric? Well, it's our job is to always still keep those lines of communication open. Go back to your neighborhoods, go back to your workplaces, go back to your schools. I literally do it to pick on members of Congress who say, I'm not gonna favor this, Staff Sergeant Alva. They still refer to me as Staff Sergeant. And even my own 2 senators from the state of Texas, and I'll ask them why. Well, it's not right. Well, no, you're not giving me a reason why. Why? Why is it so hard to accept someone and judge them for their merit, their professionalism, and their leadership on a job instead of who they are, or for who they love, or who they want to be? These are times in our nation where we're entering 16 years now, next month, of 2 wars. To keep firing people, especially in valuable critical skills such as that Arabic linguist, or someone who is trained as an explosive ordnance disposal specialist, who is the one sole person to identify roadside bombs or landmines. Why would we send him or her home for being gay when they can save American lives? All because of the prejudice that people have turned into discrimination in this country. The military, which is a branch of the Department of Defense and all my fellow military members that I so love and support to this day. But what the military has done ever since post 9/11 is what they, as we can see sometimes around the country, hurting for recruiting numbers, has now instituted moral waivers. And you can Google this, you can look at the New York Times, you can look at USA Today, you can look at the numbers, because this is a fact. That the military instituted moral waivers, and going back to those contracts about not asking certain questions, well, now on some of those contracts, and just like any job, when we apply for something and you're always asked, are you a convicted felon? Or have you, been convicted of a misdemeanor or something? Well, the military has instituted moral waivers, or the Department of Defense, that now if you were a first-degree felon, someone who has been convicted of armed robbery, battery, vehicular manslaughter, you can join the military now. I mean, you just can't be gay. So, to me, what kind of message are we sending out to the rest of the country? What kind of message are we sending to people that, gay is far worse than being a criminal? And I pick up on a lot of things because it amazes me that, just this past year, and I was born in 1970, so I know there's young individuals in the audience, is that, we just saw the 40th anniversary of the Manson murders, and I was reading some of the things, like you always read, like where some of the people who from the Manson family they're still in prison, and I was like, oh my God, Tex Watson got married in prison and has kids. I served my country, lost my leg, and I can't get married whatsoever, even if I wanted to. And I'm thinking, like, where is the irony in this situation? The whole point, I guess, what I'm trying to share with people is it's life. Life is such a gift. Life is such a blessing. I am so grateful every day that I was survived. And I go through my little I guess situations, or areas where sometimes I know even my Daryl teases me, my partner, my parents, like, oh, Eric talks to crowds and he says he's like all patient. I said, no, I never said I was patient. I still have my little quorums here and there. And I'll give you an example. How many of us go to like the store and we go through 10 items or less line, and we see one person who decides to write a check, and you're like, don't you have a debit card? You're only getting one item. And so, but if you go home, if you go home from that one person who decides to still want to write a check just for one item, and you have like 3 and you just swipe and go, if you go home and you're bothered by that, and then you wake up in the morning, you're still bothered by like, I can't believe that lady yesterday, blah, blah, blah. Then you know what? Then you and I are guilty of not getting it. Because in all reality is, and I did this when I was in the hospital when I thought like, my life is over, I've lost a leg. And then when I started seeing people come in with missing 2 legs, when I started seeing men and women coming in and their faces were just gone because being 30, 65% burdens of their body. And I started to realize, and it's the same for everyone in this audience, you think you have your worst moments in situations, and we all have them, and it's okay to be human and upset. But it's okay what we do with that negativity, or, you have to realize that someone always has it worse than you. Someone always has it worse than you. And the big picture of why I do what I do is because I want to share with people my life of where I'm going, that what I've sacrificed for, what I will continue to work for, which is of course social justice, and it's a blessed opportunity to go around the country, and I was sharing this with members of the board and other people at the reception because it's been a long week. I started last Thursday off at Northeastern University, then going Friday to Boston University, then going to hear the president speak at the national dinner, then going to the rally on Sunday. I had a day off on Monday, but then I was at NASA yesterday, and then the United States Agency on International Diversity, and then flew out this morning to come here. And then, so it's something I enjoy doing, and sure, I get tired, but it's something I also know I have to do because I want to share with people my life. And just have people realize their lives. Because in our reality, and I was sharing this with Kathleen earlier, we are only promised today. If you think about it, tomorrow is just a word. Tomorrow does not exist. It is just a word, because when it does come, it is today. And I always share this with people, live it to the fullest possible way you can. And when you have those little struggles of, and I was doing it with TSA. That's a separate story. I won't tell you what I was getting in it with TSA this morning at the airport. But I had to take a breather when I got, finally got my coffee, and I was like, let it go, Eric, and things like that. Because life is a gift. Life is a blessing. And as I stated before, nobody owns your happiness. And every single person in this country, regardless of who they are, who they love, or who they want to be, nobody owns their happiness. And I know that's why, as a person who is standing on 2 good legs again, I'm going to keep, serving my country and keep, promoting the equality or the social justice, the respect, the dignity, and really mean when I say, when I take that Pledge of Allegiance to say at the end, with liberty and justice for all, I actually mean it, because that's what it's about in this country, with liberty and justice for all, every single individual. So that's where I am these days. That's, as someone who is living life and going back, and I'll end on the story with Brian's introduction of Bo and Champ. Actually, our dog Bo was adopted after Bo Schlembecker died, and so we didn't know what other name to call him, so we called him Bo. So, of course, those of you Michigan fans and things like that. So, but life is a gift, and I'm happy to be here to share it with you. And I look forward to your questions. I look forward to meeting some of you if you want. I will stand as long as it takes if you wanted me to even answer some personal questions. And I want to end on this, and I always do this, and I forgot to do it in the beginning, was as a disabled person, Hispanic and gay, with National coming out. But the biggest one that I always like to share with next month is Veterans Day. Where are all the veterans? I know there's a lot of military people in here. Where are the military people? Raise your hand, please. Thank you for your service. Thank you very much. So thank you to GRCC. Thank you to every single individual. I was like listening to Chris. Can I borrow your sheet to go over all the Hope people again? But no, everyone included that she stated. Thank you so much, because it's been great, and it just, for me, it gets better and better. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
For those of you who would like to ask a question, if you could just step up to one of the mics.
You know, I'll ask a question first and then give someone an opportunity to go to the podium. You know, people often ask me, Eric, did people know you were gay in the military? And I tell them all the time. Yeah, I mean, I did, I won't lie, I did break the policy. But it's, you know, today I am godfather to 3 of those, my Marine buddies' sons. You know, and it was, they saw me for who I was, someone who did a job, someone who went to work every day, someone who shined his boots, did his uniform, someone who led cadence runs, someone who, you know, of course went into war leading 11 junior Marines. It was about how I did that job. And they knew, like, well, you know, he's only 5'1", everyone else is like 6 foot, we all tower over him, so I wouldn't want to mess with him. You know, he's like that kind of badass Marine, you know, don't mess with him. People knew I was a person who would do my job, and, you know, and I think that's what we're starting to see, and not just in the military, but around the country, so.
My question goes along with what you were kind of just saying. I was wondering if you would have felt comfortable coming out to the wider military community while you were still serving.
Did everyone hear a question? If I was comfortable coming out to the military at a wider community while I was still serving? Probably not as what I was doing on a limited basis. And I have to share with those of you that with the military, I think what was happening was, and the reason I was coming out or telling people was because the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy is not only just a discriminatory law. Literally, having people go to work every day and be forced to lie about who they are is really such a stressor. I mean, every November 10th or around that time, the Marine Corps, just like the Army or anyone else, celebrates the birth of their organization. The Marine Corps is really, you know, big on that. And I would attend these Marine Corps balls just as by myself. You know, and it's I'll give you another scenario too. It was really stressful because people were always constantly asking, you know, why don't you have any pictures up, or how come you don't have anything up on your desk or anything? And I remember somewhere someone said one time, you know, I don't see, as I came out, because I got a lot of letters from across the country, and then I also did get those people who, you know, would say, well, I don't see why gay people feel they have to tell people who they are all the darn time or whatever. And my response was that, you know, those of us who have jobs with cubicles, or, you know, live in, you know, when we're in college in dormitories or whatever, and, you know, a majority of us do it, when we're at work or whatever, and we put up that picture, we put up that birthday card that was given to us, we put up a picture of our friends from, you know, the July 4th weekend, say on Lake Michigan or something. People pass by and they're like, oh, who's that? Oh, that's my grandson. Or, oh, those are my parents. Or the minute you put those pictures up, guess what? Your life is not private anymore, it's public. And people see that, and people are gonna like just be curious. So for someone who had told me once, you know, I don't see why gay people can't keep their lives private. Well then, you know, ask yourself same question. So, I mean, it's you know, it's the point where enough is enough. You know, people have a right to put up that picture of, you know, the 2 men, as you heard me say, you know, soon to be a father. Daryl and I just finished our 4th and final foster parenting to adopt class, because we're about to adopt. But in some states, as we see in this country, like last year, Arkansas, and there's several others, but Arkansas passing a state constitution amendment, you know, banning same-sex couples or even single individuals from adopting children. And as a social worker, I did my undergrad work in child protective services, and the thousands and thousands of kids that stay in shelters or foster care because, you know, other people's bigotry will not let them have a family or be loved. And that is wrong. That is not just wrong, that is cruel.
Eric, you and I talked before your speech about the president currently talking about don't ask, don't tell. You had some very interesting things to say about that. Can you share that with everyone?
Sure, thanks, Terry. Just so everyone knows, because in fact, you'll hear a lot of drama with, you know, of course, you know, when President Obama took over the office of the presidency, a lot of people looked to like social justice right away. The Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the bill to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which is the Military Readiness Enhancement Act, is in a process where Congressman Patrick Murphy is the new author of it. In 2005, when we introduced it, we probably got up to 145 sponsors, co-sponsors. And of course, the bill gets reintroduced every 2 years. So in 2009, when he introduced it, it is HR 1283. If you ever go Google it, I forget what HR stands for. I think it stands for the House of Representatives, House Bill 1283. As of today, even after Saturday from the president's speech in saying that he will, repeal, follow through on his campaign promise, and of course everybody refers back to 1993 because then President Clinton did the same thing. So he's under a lot of pressure, of course, and I'm not defending him, I'm just here to state that this is what I perceive is going to happen, is that most people, we have 176 sponsors as of Saturday in the House. We are getting near that magic number of 200 plus in the House to have a vote on the floor. But there is no co-sponsorship in the Senate yet. No Senate senator has come forward to actually sponsor the bill that would coincide with 1283. I do hear, though, that Senator Levin, your own senator, is actually going to ask for Senate Armed Services hearings. And he's invited the Secretary of Gates, Robert Gates, Defense Secretary, and the Joint Chief of Staff, Admiral Mullen. So it'll be interesting to see when this is going to happen, because what those two men say can play a big part on if someone's going to sponsor in the Senate or what happens even in the House. But it's not the president's job when you may hear him say, I will get rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It's not his job, it's Congress's job. It's Congress's responsibility. The president, of course, has the authority to sign it once the bill reaches his desk, or as in case veto it or something. But it's when you hear people, and I think he said that at the dinner Saturday, he's like, I will get rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. In all actuality, it's not his job, it's Congress's job. It's our elected officials. Of course, his promise or his job would be, when it gets to his desk, is to sign it. There's so many things going on in legislation towards social justice and diversity, especially with the hate crimes legislation that has already passed the Senate and should pass the House, and then, of course, hit the president's desk probably in the next 2 weeks. I mean, that is huge for this country, because I know New York just had another hate crime. A gay man was beat to death. Just yesterday or this, I'm lost on days, but I think it was this weekend. And then, of course, we're working towards, with HRC, Employment Non-Discrimination Act, ENDA, because in 39 states you can still be fired for being gay, and for being transgender, and in 33 states, you can still be fired for being gay. And I think even here in Michigan, I think, just for being transgender. I know in Texas it's both. You could be fired for being gay or transgender. It's not a darn thing you could do to sue that manager or that boss and comes in one day just to come up with all these other excuses, and in reality, and that they fired you for being gay. So those are pieces of legislation that are changing in this country towards social justice and equality, for what I call it. So does that answer your question, Terry? Hi.
I wondered if you could speak to the effect on lesbians and bisexuals and transgender people, particularly who are identifying as female, and how they're affected by Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
That's a good question. Did everybody hear a question? Actually, what we've noticed for Don't Ask, Don't Tell is that lesbian women are the biggest number from the gay population that end up getting discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. The certain thing about the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell is, and I tell people this because, well, of course, we're talking about diversity. I don't know as far as like what the numbers are of people being discharged just for even being bisexual or transgender. And I always share this with people because, of course, I ask myself why too. The legislation of today for the Military Readiness Enhancement Act, it only talks about allowing gay men and women to serve openly. And so I believe the transgender population is the last real group of individuals who will really, really have to be fighting for their equality. Because if you don't know what gender identity is, or what someone who self-identifies as a man or a woman, and psychologically in their mind, and then of course has not had the transition of having the anatomy change, you really need to understand that. Because I'll give you an example, and this is in 2007 was when I started to teach myself. I can't, as an individual, I'm not going to ignore all groups of diversity or one group because, I haven't taught myself. We really need to educate ourselves on certain areas or all areas of diversity, including the transgender. Because I have a couple friend back home, Lauren and Carrie, and Lauren and Carrie have been married for 27 years, but about their 18th mark, Lauren used to be Lawrence, and they're still legally married. And people ask them, or I've asked them too, I said, I'm just curious because, I'm learning, do you consider yourself lesbians? And they will both tell you no. So these are areas of even sensitivity or areas that we need to be aware of, but because Lauren and Carrie are still married, and everybody knows Lauren used to be, a male, that her company recognizes, the same-sex benefits or the benefits that they have in a relationship or partnership or civil union or anything like that. These are things that I'm still learning myself. But these are things that we need to talk about and not to be afraid of, and we need to educate ourselves. And I think that's what the whole, philosophy is about, why people really don't want, looking back on the whole don't ask, don't tell about allowing gay men and women to serve openly. It's not just, fear, it's being uneducated. It's lack of tolerance and acceptance. And we may not change everybody, but, we sure need to try, because, people deserve to be who they are in this country.
Yes, Eric, I'm Tony, and by the way, Eric's my middle name, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, yeah. What is your proudest achievement in being in the military and your heritage? Are you Mexican?
I believe you would ask that question. Would you have another? Well, no. Do you have more questions?
Yeah, and
I'm trying to keep them all in tally.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay, just go ahead.
Your first one was my proudest achievement.
Yeah,
I guess probably my proudest achievement, or I don't know. There's so many. I don't look at them as, I've never deemed myself a hero, and even the President Bush himself said you're a hero. That title I give to other people. I see myself as just someone who cares. I've always cared ever since I was a kid, and my parents knew that when I was always bringing the stray cats home. Like, why do you keep bringing the stray cats home? Stop picking them up, And I've always cared. I guess my proudest achievement would be just living my life every day as much as I can. Mm-hmm. In the military, I always did. I was a real successful person, not to give like all my medals or whatever, but I had quite a few accomplishments and commendations and meritorious promotions. And if I'm Mexican or Hispanic, I always say I'm Hispanic. I said I was Mexican once, and my mom's like, "No, you're Hispanic." I'm like, "What's the real difference?" I'm like, and so I don't know. I see how I get tongue twisted. I say I'm Hispanic. I'm from San Antonio, Texas. I don't speak Spanish. Mm-hmm. My parents didn't. I say it's my fault I didn't learn, because the only time they ever spoke it is when they were like, "Shh, the kids are here," and they would start talking Spanish. So I would be like, "Well, I don't want to hear, fine." And then I would go into another room, and so shame on me because I didn't learn. But even taking it in college and high school, I can write some things in Spanish. I just, I think being in Japan for 3 whole years, I learned more Japanese than I did Spanish. So, but I don't know. Does that answer all your questions? Or?
And did you know that San Antonio in Spanish means Saint Anthony?
Yes. Yeah, I knew that, because if you've never been to San Antonio, I encourage you to go. We have a beautiful river that runs through the city, and when you do go, and there's a statue of the Saint Anthony, then. And if you do go and you visit and you see St. Anthony, like, oh, there it is. Eric said it would be right there, or there he is. So St. Anthony is the one, I guess, who founded San Antonio. Mm-hmm. And if you do go and you see the Alamo, it's okay if you say, "That's it." Everyone always does it. I'm serious. Because everybody hears the Alamo and things, and so they're like, "That's it." So thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
As a family member, of a local Army veteran that was killed in Iraq back in 2005. I and my family are grateful and respectful and want to thank you, number one, for your service and your sacrifice. I think ultimately that's just huge. And we understand your sacrifice. As a gay businessman, I'd also like to thank you for your drive and enthusiasm and your tireless days in this battle that we shouldn't be having to fight with just equal rights. What can we do locally to help in this incentive, in this push to progress and help this country along and just making everybody, as you said, equal and liberty and justice for all?
That's a good question, and I appreciate. Thank you for all that homage, and I'm always humbled by it. I mean, thank you. I really believe my mom as a kid when she used to tell me everything happens for a reason, Eric, and I believe her now, especially doing the the work that I do or I want to do. I tell people as individuals to go back and like with their elected officials, with their even as log on to their websites, even as your city councils, or talk to your individuals and figure out where they stand on certain issues. And when they stand opposed to, say, non-discrimination in the workplace towards people of sexual orientation or gender identity, ask them why. I mean, put them on the spot. I mean, to have someone else have that greater power of prejudice that's turned into discrimination and oppression, put them on the spot and ask them why. But not only that, I spent the weekend Sunday at the rally with Judy Shepard. Does everyone know who Judy Shepard is? The mother of Matthew Shepard. We've become pretty good friends, and I know the rally was on C-SPAN and everything, and she made a good point. Go back to your neighborhoods. Go back to your businesses. Go back to your places of coffee talk or whatever. Go back and just talk about these issues and see where people are. And because if we don't talk about the issues, then we don't move forward. We don't communicate with each other. As far as there's some opinions and voices that I can't turn that will always oppose me, because they feel that their life is and not to get into the whole religion aspect. Well, God says it's this way, Eric, and everything like that. And I'm like, God also said, life is a gift, but it's go back and literally put yourselves in those positions, not as a defense, but as a learning tool for other people, to really see how much. I think even my own story of coming out really changed turned a lot of heads, even in my own community of fellow military buddies who I had served with from, like, say, 1991 on until 2004. I mean, people who didn't, who finally had never said, well, you know what, I always thought that, gay people, just didn't belong, but I was wrong. Or I've had so many people come up to me and say, I was wrong, and I'm sorry. And say, I need to learn more. I need to try. I need to accept more. And maybe this is the start of it, because I know I can't. People will say, your friendship, I love you too much, or I can't just tell you can't come into my house because you're gay now, or don't eat at the same restaurant I am because you're gay, or something like that. I mean, people's fears, people's own beliefs and values sometimes get the best of them, but we as individuals have that power to go and talk about them. And it's and that's a saying that my friend Dan Graney teaches me, that the once Dr. Martin Luther King stated, quote, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Mm-hmm. And that is true. Mm-hmm. We have to constantly keep talking. We have to constantly keep teaching. And I think we are moving towards that, because from 1993, from 34% to 75% now of American people favoring, openly gay men and women in the military. I think, the generations coming up, all these young, great, souls of college kids, high school kids, most of them being born with, iTunes and iPods already in their incubators, their courage and tenacity is amazing. I mean, you got to admit, their courage and tenacity is amazing that, most of their friends, their best friends, that they have someone who's gay or someone who's bisexual or someone who, when I was working for Child Protective Services, I had a high school kid I used to have to go check on in high school, and Anthony was a junior in high school, but Anthony would wear lipstick and carry a purse all over school. And I thought, this is who he is. But I was afraid like kids were going to pick on him. But, this is who he was. This is who he self-identified. And so, these are things that, we need to, teach and just have other people see. And, and sure, you're going to get people just turn the other way. They don't want to deal with it. But, that does still not give the right of someone else to oppress someone else and tell them, don't you live on my block, or don't you go to the store where I am at, don't you go in there, that restroom, I'm using it. No more. We did it far too long. We did it in the 40s, when we imprisoned Japanese Americans because they were Japanese. We did it in the 50s and 60s when we told people of color, where to sit on a bus, or we told people, where to drink out of a water fountain. No more. We can't do that anymore. Enough is enough. Thank you.
Eric, I just want to thank you for your military service. I know a lot of people really appreciate it, especially in the gay community. I identify as a gay activist. I myself am gay. And so for a lot of people, I was going to ask, similar to what this gentleman asked, what are 3 things they could walk away with and do tonight? I also just want to ask you one other quick question, too. I didn't get to make it out to DC for the march, but I had a lot of friends who did. Did you have a lot of military come up to you and say that they're supportive? Or what's been the general response from, Marines, sailors, people who are just Army?
I've had a lot of people that were not gay that have come out to support me. My lieutenant who I went to with Iraq did come forward and tell me, you know what, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore, and then kind of just defriended me. But I also had my commander who I served with in 95 to 97, Colonel Blank. I remember on that day, February 28th in 2007, I had him in my caller ID because he used to come visit me in Walter Reed and Bethesda. When he called me and I saw the caller ID, I was like, uh-oh, I felt like I was in trouble. And when the phone rang, he's like, Staff Sergeant, and this is a gentleman who's 6'4", Irish Catholic. And I was like, yes, sir. He goes, I want to tell you, he goes, I saw you on Good Morning America, and I saw you in the Washington Post. He goes, I'm very, very proud of you. He said, you know what? I'm not surprised. He goes, as the person that you used to be, he goes, you probably are the best Marine I've ever had the luxury of serving with, and that has worked for me. He goes, 25 years. It's taken me 25 years, Staff Sergeant. He goes, to change. He goes, and I'm sorry. He goes, because 25 years ago, if you had asked me about any of these things, and of course allowing gays in the military, he goes, I would have said, and he kind of cursed. He goes, and black, no. And I said, he goes, but you know what? Enough is enough. Or he said, we need to change. He goes, and I thank you for giving me something to be proud of, that I had the opportunity to serve with you in the military, in the uniform. So, but even at the rally, people were coming up to me. Lieutenant Dan Choi was there, the Arabic linguist who got discharged. So, I mean, people that are, gay or, allies, or it doesn't matter. People were just coming up to me to pay homage. And it's not always been like that. In 2007, there were people who opposed me, people who sent me hate mail. I did get 2 death threats. People who said, you should have lost both your legs and just bled to death in Iraq. I mean, there was just, we don't live in a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect world, but I did get some people who opposed me, and thank you.
Thanks.
I think we're going to this site real quick.
I guess I'd like to take that one step further and find out, you came out post-retirement, not then under the auspices of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell law. What was the general response of the military in general, military proper, as far as your post-retirement benefits and accolades and that sort of thing?
Actually, I still get all my benefits, and I didn't lose any of my benefits or anything like that. I took a big risk because, of course, I could have lost benefits and things like that, but I still get my military ID card, I get my military, retirement, things like that. But I haven't faced any, after effect of repercussions of me coming out. Usually, and I do a lot of campuses where they'll have ROTC programs, and a lot of the cadets will come, and of course they'll sit in the back of the room, and you could see their high and tight haircuts and their stern and everything like that. And literally, like, sometimes I feel maybe it's just paranoia staring me down. But what it is then afterwards they'll come up and they'll be all stern, shake my hand real hard, and thank you for your service. And some of them will voice their opinion and say, I understand what you're saying, and I thank you for your service, Staff Sergeant, but I just can't see myself working with someone who is gay. And I always pose that question back on them, like, well, you won't be in the military forever. And if you do decide to make it a career, or you're going to have to ask yourself, as a good leader, someone who wants to lead troops into combat and things like that, what limitations or what avenues of individuals, what are you going to be looking for? I mean, when you start basing it on people's diversity, who do you really want to go to war with? I mean, you have to really start looking at, as a leader, someone who, especially going to be a commissioned officer, be prepared of who the troops you're going to lead, because you are dealing with people's lives, especially in combat. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a more logistical question, I think. When I think about people serving in the military, I don't know how the males and the females are separated. So I don't know how that works. I was wondering about that, but I was also wondering, not only is there the issues of females and females, possibly being distracted by their sexuality and being such close quarters with, people they're serving with, but I was wondering if it is allowed for males and females in the Army to be sexually involved, or just involved in a relationship without that interfering with their service to the country, and how that's dealt with.
That's a good question. Everyone hear her question? I thought it was leaning more towards, and I'm going to throw this out for you. We always love the shower scenario. You're going to hear about the shower scenario. Not to make a joke. You're always going to hear, and that's one of the biggest arguments where people say you can't repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, because you can't have, gay men showering with straight men. You can't have gay women showering with gay women and things like that. And I start to think, wait a minute. Since 1993, gay men and women have been serving, in the military, or at least we know, but if you really think about it consciously, way back before 1776, I mean, let's think logically here. Gay men and women have served in the military even before this country's independence. So the fact of the matter is about the whole, about close quarters, which Sergeant Major Jones from that hearing last year said you can't have gay men living in close quarters with other straight men because, the male attraction or whatever, this is what I'm gonna, as a social worker, my social work's coming out, the stigma that people apply to, like Elaine Donnelly said, when, if you allow gays in the military, you have all new cases of AIDS. The stigma and the prejudice of what people stereotype, all gays have AIDS, all gays are promiscuous, all gay men are pedophiles. That is not just ludicrous, that is plain ignorance. Those people who enter the military openly gay, when the law does pass, when Don't Ask, Don't Tell is gone, we go by a uniform code of military justice. Just as when a man rapes a woman or something, he is prosecuted under the form of the Code of Military Justice. Most people have asked, is the Uniform Code of Military Justice going to have to be modified, Eric? I said most likely, But most people that do not follow the rules and regulations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice are prosecuted. Not prosecuted, but, of course, given court-martials or things like that. Any gentleman, any female, of course, going even in the same place of the workplace. You go to work tomorrow and you could be straight, and I really hate these titles. I really do, because it's not about straight, gay, transgender. It's about people. It's about people's lives, what I've been talking about. It's about the lives that each one of us are entitled to have and be, If a gay man goes to work tomorrow and starts to sexually harass a straight man, you know what? There's policies on that which are called sexual harassment. That person has become now unprofessional. That person is now become, someone who's not doing their job. And so the same law will apply to gay men and women in the military that apply to, people that are heterosexual, that, when a straight man is harassing a straight woman or something, or, on sexual harassment or things like that, we are not asking for special quarters. We are not asking for special showers, special restrooms. And 9 out of 10 times, the only time you ever do that in the military is during boot camp. Once you get to your permanent station, most people, majority of people have their own living quarters where showers are separate, and you don't shower all the time together. I mean, in reality, why else go to the public gym? Because you're going to see people showering. And so when people bring that argument up, of living in close quarters, it's the same thing like if I was to go shopping at, the mall or something, and I'm at the register or something, now I notice, and see, I almost did that, and I hate that, because when I did come out, some people would say, well, you don't look gay, Eric. I'm like, what's that supposed to mean, I mean, I'm just saying, if I can, tell that someone's gay or something, or, that they're holding hands with, say, if Daryl and I were to register, and someone's now close to us, and if I even get a quick, or smile and say hi, yeah, someone may be like, oh my God, he's hitting on me. It's the fear that we need to get rid of. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, it's ludicrous, it's absurd, and it's ignorant. I mean, if we fail and just look at these one little, aspects of it about the close quarters, about all this, then we're forgetting everything else. We're forgetting everything else from past history about, even in the 1948 about social change when, President Truman desegregated the troops. People said, well, I can't work with, white people and black people working together. I mean, okay, well, now the quarters have to change. Everybody has to change, and we did. And I mean, we can't just keep passing life by and saying, well, I just think, if we do it, what are the risks of someone, staring at someone else in the shower? I mean, or anything other than that. I mean, I don't know if I'm answering your whole question. I appreciate you being the devil's advocate.
I guess my underlying question is it against military code for a male and a female to engage in a straight relationship in any way? And would that be a violation of?
That's a good question. If you and I were the same rank, then no. If it was something during, if you were enlisted, I was officer, then it's just like the workplace. It's called fraternization. Okay. But if you were a straight individual, if you were a straight female and I was a straight male officer enlisted, it would still be wrong, because that's called fraternization in the military. But if you and I were the same rank, and it happens all the time where people go off to their tech schools, and then of course now you have, Marine Corps is the only one who does boot camp separately. Marine Corps will not interming the genders, or co-eds. Army does it, Navy does it, Air Force does it. They all do boot camp together. That doesn't mean they sleep together. They go to their separate barracks and everything. But the Marine Corps is the only branch that has boot camp that is separate. But of course, when we get to our tech schools, whether if you're going to be a cook, to a supply specialist, to an admin specialist, to a combat engineer, and that's another thing. Back in 1995, I remember being on Okinawa, where we got our first female combat engineer in Okinawa, Japan. She was the very first in the Marine Corps, and she was the first female to that unit of 1,000 Marines, male Marines. But she still had her own room. But she still did the runs with us, and she did things like that. But people were like, when they heard about it, and it's another argument people use about the morale and the cohesion, that if you allow someone of that diverse, like gender, women don't belong in combat, then people feared that it would destroy cohesion. It didn't. She did her job just like anyone else. I know several female Marines who always shot better than I did on the rifle range. I mean, it's just, that's who they were. That's who people are. It's not a competition, but people doing their jobs. That means I try harder, that I make sure I'm hitting the target or something, But in these schools, you will have, but you bring up a good point, because hypothetically speaking, let's say Don't Ask, Don't Tell, gets repealed, and you have 2 men now, who are enlisted, E1, go to school and start, having a relationship. Bottom line is, if they're not, it's not affecting their job performance, it's not affecting, them being Marines, following the rules and regulations, then no.
And
Why prosecute them?
And so the same stands for straight couples as well. Then.
Yes, when it comes to the rules and regulations about fraternization and sexual harassment, anything else like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think we'll have like one or two more, and then because I know Chris is like, get off the stage, Eric.
As an openly gay rights activist and the president of the Gay Straight Alliance here at Grand Rapids Community College, I thank you for what you are doing
Thank you.
and the fight that you are fighting for us for social justice and equality.
I appreciate that.
My question is, for the bisexual people that are in military, are they ostracized in the fact that they haven't quite, quote unquote, chosen a side?
I've never really, I've never really met anyone in particular in the military who came up to me and said they were bisexual. I didn't, in the Marine Corps, even for me, it was always about my job, and it's not to say that I didn't go to, clubs or bars, or I did, I started to, but the people that I would meet were either lesbian or gay. I've never met someone in particular who was bisexual, and that's not to take anything away or less from anyone else who, is bisexual. We are all created differently, as individuals, and I can't believe I just used that word differently. I hate that word. I mean, we are all unique people. We are created uniquely, and but it's just, I've never really identified with, bisexuals in the military, but that's not to deny the fact that they aren't there. There are bisexual people in the military. I hope I'm answering your question. That's one I'm going to have to get better on, because that's a first. So I'm sorry about that.
It's fine. Thank you.
And thank you for your work as president of your Gay Straight Alliance. So appreciate it.
Have you ever been denied to speak at a certain venue? And if so, how do you feel about being censored like that?
Have I ever been denied?
To speak at a certain venue, like.
That is a very good question. I have. I was in 2007, I won't say the college's name, I was actually scheduled to go speak to a Catholic school in Boston. It was, what did I say? What did I say? Well, anyways, I'm just saying, okay, let me rephrase that, let's back up. I was going to go speak at a school, and I think it was, the speech was scheduled for November, and they had a new president get elected in August. And one of his first, changes was he eliminated my speech because he didn't see it in the campuses or the university's mission and values and stuff. And so I was denied coming to the campus. So, what was your second question,
how did you feel about that?
I was a little upset, and I thought that I felt more remorseful for the students and the faculty and the Diversity Learning Center who had put it all together in months preparation, and I really felt bad for them.
Yeah, I asked because I've read about it happening even here in Grand Rapids, where, we have our own Catholic college here in Grand Rapids where a gay rights speaker has been denied to speak, and I actually wrote a paper on that. It was one of the big things that I wanted to ask you, because, that's one of the biggest things with your cause.
Yeah.
Censorship and the freedom of speech.
Exactly.
So, thank you.
Thank you. And I know we'll take like a couple more, because I'm starting to see, I know the crowd's like, okay, you know what, get him off.
Hello, Eric.
Hi.
Also as a Marine combat veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, I thank you for your service.
Likewise.
And I also admire your courage on being able to fight on one front and then come back and fight on a completely different one here in the States. I think that's amazing that you can do both of those.
I appreciate that.
But if you could speak to the entire GLBT demographic in the military, the 65,000 or so you said, the ones that are still lying today about who they are and what they do, what would you say to them?
I think I would say the same thing and of course, I'm going to be a hypocrite here. It's the same thing when I go to colleges, campuses, and I was just at Northeastern University in Boston Thursday, and I had a female ROTC cadet member come up to me, but she wanted to come out in ROTC, And my advice to her was don't, because the law hasn't changed. And I didn't want to see her, you know, losing her scholarship at ROTC. And she goes, but I want to be happy, Eric. I said, I know. I said, it's a sacrifice. I went through it many, many, many years. And if I could address all 65,000, you know, gay men and women in the military, I would tell them to keep doing the jobs that they so signed up for, took the oath for. You know, that's not to deny them the fact when they go home and, you know, and their front door is locked, or if they want to have a relationship, then fine, go ahead. But you need to be careful because the law hasn't changed. And sometimes when we discharge some of these young men and women from the military for being gay, we are also sometimes hurting their benefits in the long run for the rest of their lives. You know, some that you know are using the military to pay for their college or things like that. So I'm always just cautious in telling people that for members of the military that, you know, and that's where I said I was a hypocrite, because I did break the policy, but for them not to be so open about it, or, you know, because I wasn't, I mean, but to just be careful of who they tell. I'm not saying they can't tell anyone. Tell your closest friend, tell your best friend, you know, but just be careful because the law hasn't changed, and they will discharge you, or those who you know, who fall into, because we are also noticing, because of two wars, consistent wars, as you know, I mean, to serve your country, and thank you so much. I mean, Afghanistan and Iraq is you know, and I try to explain to people what it was like when we first got into Kuwait at 40-something degrees in January of 2003, and for 20 days not to have a shower because there was no water. 20 days without a shower where you're changing your socks, but it doesn't even help when you have the sandstorms, and you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the sacrifices that men and women are willing to make, regardless of who they are, you know, black, white, Hispanic, Mexican, you know, gay, straight, you know, the sacrifices that someone is willing to give to this country of the United States, it is not an easy job, but every person should have that opportunity if they want to. Everybody should. Yeah, so, thank you. And we'll take this, answer your questions.
Yes,
and I'll be here afterwards if you want it for a little bit.
Thank you.
And we'll take this last question, and I promise this last one.
Hi, Eric. My name's Eric. I was raised Catholic, and I'm assuming you were.
I was, oh, yes.
It's no secret the Catholic Church is struggling with their own issues of don't ask, don't tell. Can you talk a little bit about the support you've received from religious leaders?
Most of the support I've received from religious leaders are mostly, you know, from the Unitarian Church of Christ, you know, Episcopalian Church, Metropolitan Community Church. I have received not one support, or maybe just a few from the Catholic Church. I will be honest, I do not attend Catholic Church anymore, but my grandmother, and she just passed away August 4th. And of course, you know, as I remember telling Daryl, because Daryl's like, you know, we were flipping through the channel. You ever seen do y'all have Catholic television here? Where, well, I forget what the nun's name is, where, with the big glasses, and she's reciting the Holy Rosary. I was telling Daryl, I said, this is what we're going to do Thursday night. He goes, what do you mean? I said, and he goes, what is she doing? I said, she's reciting the Rosary. That's what we do. And so sure enough, when we started the Rosary, of course, I still follow, you know, in respect to my grandmother, I was following, you know, the Rosary and our traditions. And poor Daryl just sat there not really thinking, you know, like, what is going on? You know, why are all these people chanting the same prayer 10 times and everything? And poor thing, but I had already explained it to him. But other than paying respects to, you know, families and friends when in a situation like that, and then going back to the 3 godsons that I baptized were all Catholic. I don't attend Catholic, you know, church. It's hard for me, and it saddens me because it's being raised Catholic, but for the things that what people say about me, you know, as a gay person. So it's something that even that's a struggle for me. So I hope that answers your question. I'll end with this since you all came. You know, I want to show you my leg, and this is how much I lived my country, you know. So, and this is yeah. So this is amazing because this is a computerized leg, and it's what gives me the ability to walk with almost without a limp, because modern technology it's a microprocessor And I could literally, and you'll see me in a minute, go down the stairs. I don't want to try it and then be Beyonce like that one on YouTube. So, but so I charge it at night next to my cell phone too, because it's a computerized leg. But it's even realizing, when I get home, going back to that saying, I go to crutches and everything, and when I take my leg off and I'm walking around, like tonight when I get back to the hotel room, and even then, when someone has lost both their legs and are taking both their prosthetics off, they can't go to crutches. They may go to a wheelchair, maybe just, pull themselves on the ground. We as individuals have very, very blessed lives. And even in those little struggles, which it's normal. I mean, we're going to have struggles every day. But it's the fact that we stop, take a breath, and then just realize, wow, I should be thankful because I know, someone always has it worse than I do. But thank you so much, and thank you for staying. And, I apologize for blah, blah, blah. So, thank you. So.